In this video, I am going to show you how to download, install, and start using Neo4j Desktop version 1.2.3 on Windows. Installing version 1.2.2 and later is different from previous versions of Neo4j Desktop, as it introduces the generation of an activation key for the user. You go to the Neo4j website. Before you start the download process, it is important to make sure that you have no web browser extensions enabled, such as ad blockers or a firewall that will prevent access to neo4j.com. At the top, you click the download button, which brings you to the download page. Notice here that we accept tracking cookies by neo4j.com. You want to install Neo4j Desktop, so you click the button here for downloading the desktop application. At this point, you must provide Neo4j with some identifying information before you can begin the download, as we use this information to create a Neo4j account associated with your email address. You then click Download Desktop. A desktop key now appears. This is the activation key you will use as your license to use Neo4j Desktop. Now it detects what kind of system you are on, and it presents you with a page with the installation instructions and some getting started information, some of which we cover in this video. Keep in mind, however, that with each version of Neo4j Desktop, the instructions on this page may change. You should copy this desktop key for later use. Once the download completes, you simply run the installer executable. By default, Neo4j Desktop can only be used by a user with admin privileges. We recommend that you specify that any user on your system can use Neo4j. Next, the default location for the installation is presented. We recommend that you use the default so that there are no issues with permissions. The installation now commences. Neo4j Desktop now starts for the first time on your system. First, you must agree to the license agreement. Next, you are presented with the location where Neo4j databases will be stored. We recommend that you use the default location, but if you choose a different location, it must be a location where users will have write permissions. The next step is software registration. If you have a valid activation key, you paste it here. If you do not have an activation key, you enter your name, email, and organization information to obtain an activation key. This activation key gives you a license to use Neo4j Desktop for a year. If you do not want to provide your identifying information, you can click the Start 30-Day Trial button. We recommend registering so that you can automatically receive updates to the product. At this point, you are almost done with the installation. The final dialog is about anonymous reporting. You should click OK here, but if you later decide you do not want reporting, you can always change it in your Neo4j configuration. And here's the user interface for Neo4j Desktop. In Neo4j Desktop, you can create one or more projects, each with its own database or set of databases. In addition to databases, a project can contain graph apps. By default, the Neo4j ETL tool and Neo4j browser are available for your projects. It is possible to download and install other graph apps for your development environment. A project can also use additional libraries. By default, the APOC, Graph Algorithms, and GraphQL libraries are available, which are extensions to the Cipher query language. Here we create a graph or database for this project. We create a local graph, meaning that the database will run on our local system. You must provide a password for the graph, which is something that applications use to connect to the database after it is started. You can select which version of the database you want to create, but we recommend the latest version of Neo4j. After you have created the graph, you can either manage it or start it. If we click Manage, we see that the database is stopped. You can click the Open Folder button, which opens a File Explorer window for the location of the database files on your system. For a particular database, the Import, Lib, and Plugins folders are where you may add files to your installation. You can start the database by clicking this button. And here we see that it is running and that it is the active database for our project. We stop the database. You can customize the name of your projects. Here we specify the project name to be Test Project. Suppose that in our development environment we want a different project that may have different data in its graph. We create a new project and name it Test Project 2. And we add a graph specifying the password for the graph. Then we start the graph for this project. Once started, in the Manage view, we can inspect the logs for this started database and view the configuration settings for this database. Suppose we wanted to use the APOC library for our application development with this database. We stop the database and then select Add Plugin. Select APOC to install for this project. With this database, we can now use both cipher statements and APOC library functions and procedures for our application. We start the database. A started database uses specific ports for clients connected to it. Most applications, such as Java applications, will use the Bolt port. Neo4j browser uses the HTTP port. You typically use Neo4j browser to get started with your development with Neo4j, where you can enter cipher statements to access the database. Here is the user interface for Neo4j browser, and we are automatically connected to the currently running database for this project. This database has no nodes or relationships in it. Back in Neo4j Desktop, if you click the Graph Applications link in the left panel, you can see the graph applications that are currently available for your projects. The Notification Center has information about current updates that are available. In Settings, you can view and change a number of configuration values for your use of Neo4j Desktop, including whether a proxy is used or if you're using Neo4j Desktop offline. And here is our activation key information. We see that this software is licensed for a year. So that's a quick tour of how to download, install, and get started with Neo4j Desktop on Windows.